6th grade, this next lesson is going to seem fairly familiar, hopefully. But honestly, if I had to pick one lesson in Latin class as like the single most important lesson, it's probably this one. This is the foundation that is laid to understand all of how Latin nouns work. So first of all, some terms. Latin is what we call an inflected language, which means it's a language in which the nouns and or adjectives change their form or their endings depending on their case, which of course probably makes you, well, what is case, right? Case is a category that tells you the function of a noun. What I mean by that is a case tells you if the noun is going to be a subject, if it's going to be a direct object, if it's going to be part of a prepositional phrase, that sort of thing. Some cases that we have in Latin are nominative and accusative. Those are the ones we'll be looking at first. And in English, they correspond to being the subject of the sentence and the direct object of the sentence. The next word we want to talk about is decline. Sorry, I'm going to grab my highlighter, my laser pointer here. When nouns decline, that's what the verb form that we mean to say that they're changing their endings. So when you decline a noun or an adjective, you put them into their different cases. You change their endings and put them into their different forms. And then declensions are what we call those nouns that use similar endings. So they're divided into sets. There's 5 declensions in Latin. We're only going to learn 3 of them for your whole time in middle school Latin. You won't learn 4th and 5th declension until Latin 2. So for all of 1A and 1B, we'll just deal with 3 declensions. If all that sounds super confusing, that's okay. We're going to work through this together. So English actually has cases. English began life as an inflected language. Well, depending on where you want to pinpoint the start of English. But some very early Old English has inflected nouns. And in English today, most of our pronouns still hold on to that. Pronouns are, remember, are words that replace nouns like him, her, its. So for example, he, him, his, she, her, who, and whom. Right? These all mean he, him, his are all the same thing, but he is a subject, him is a direct object, his is used when you're owning something. Same thing with she and her, who and whom, who's a subject, whom is a direct object. If you've ever wondered how to tell the difference between who and whom, you'll learn from practicing Latin cases. So the cool thing about Latin being an inflected language, what I think is really the coolest thing about Latin actually, is that it makes word order very flexible because it's not about what order the words in, but what the endings are on the words that tell you how to translate the sentence. And this means like Latin poetry can do some really cool stuff. Like imagine in English poetry, if you could move the words around whichever order you need to make them rhyme. It'd be neat, right? The Romans can do just that. All right, so some exempli gratia. In English, right, where I started, the boy sees the dog. I'm going to go ahead and get my pen so I can mark things if I need to here. In this sentence, we have a subject, boy, a verb, sees, and a direct object, dog, right? And it tells you the direction of the action. The boy is looking at the dog, right? So we could even underline boy, double underline our dog over here. So the boy is doing the action is happening to the dog. If I change the word order in English though, the dog sees the boy, I've changed the meaning of my sentence. Now dog is my subject, sees is still my verb, that hasn't changed, but boy is now my direct object, right? I could, for example, we could see the eyes of the dog in these different pictures. We could make the boy have his eyes shut in this picture over here because he can't see the dog necessarily. The dog sees him. Whereas in this one, the boy is looking at the dog. The dog doesn't have to be looking at him for this to work, right? So by changing the order of the words, I've changed the meaning of my sentence. That doesn't happen in Latin, and we can actually see how that doesn't happen with English pronouns. If I use the sentence, he sees him, he is my subject, sees is my verb, and him, pull him up, is my direct object. Subject, direct object. But if I flip those words around a little bit, him, he sees, well, guess what? He, still my subject, him, still my direct object. It doesn't sound like very good English, but technically it works. But the important thing is that he is always the subject of my sentence. Sees, him, he. Again, sounds like awful English, but we can sort of understand what the person is trying to say. He has to be my subject. Him has to be my direct object, because that's simply how those words work. We don't say him went to the store. We don't say I see he, right? And that's because this is a carryover from when English itself was an inflected language. Great, so let's continue talking about this a little bit, and we'll look at some more examples in English, and then we'll go on to talk about it more in Latin. So in English, looking at some of our nouns and pronouns that we know, especially pronouns, right? He is always the subject, and we said the name for something that's the subject is the nominative case. And you might recall from our last lesson, right, we always underline our subjects. Him is always the accusative case form of our masculine pronoun and is the direct object. Who works the same way. Who is our nominative case and is the subject. Whom is the accusative case and is the direct object. Notice him and whom, both ending in M when they become the accusative case. We're actually going to see that happen in English as well. Accusative cases use the M as their ending to mark that they're the direct object. So in Latin, there's 5 declensions, like I said. There's 3 genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter. Genders are really just ways to grammatically group nouns within a declension. It's a way of saying, hey, some of these nouns, they all clearly belong together because they use most of the same endings, but some of them are a little bit different. So when that happens, we say, well, this set is masculine, this set's feminine, and this set's neuter. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're like girl words or boy words. For example, the word for beard, one of the words for beard in Latin is feminine. Right? So it is not actually based on the gender of the object. It is with names sometimes and with adjectives sometimes, but not always. So it's a little different than what we mean when we're talking about genders in terms of like people. There are 5 main cases in Latin: the nominative, the genitive, the dative, the accusative, and the ablative. We're going to deal mostly with nominative and accusative right now. You're going to be seeing, you actually have already seen ablative case crop up a little bit in your stories and in your textbook. And you actually have already seen genitive case too. Genitive case is the endings that we use when we do our dictionary forms of the nouns. But what I really want you to focus on right now is nominative and accusative case. There's 2 other cases called vocative and locative, but they're really just fancy uses of the nominative. Don't worry about them. I'll talk to you a little bit if they come up, but they're not something we need to worry about right now. All right, so cases. Now we're going to zoom in a little bit more on nominative and accusative case. So let's talk about them. So nominative case comes from the Latin word nomen, which means name. It's the dictionary form of the noun, which means when you go to look up a noun in the dictionary, the nominative case is the case that you see. It's what you look up, and it's the form I give you on your vocab quizzes. It is almost always the subject of the sentence, or it's the predicate nominative. It can't be anything else. You can have other things be the subject, but nominative case, if there's a nominative case, it's going to be the subject or predicate nominative. So some example gratia for you. Metella, let me grab my pen now. Metella in atrio sedet. So metella is my subject. It's my nominative case noun. Sedet is my verb, right? If I look at my picture, I can see metella, she's doing the action, which is sitting. We also have a prep phrase in here if you want to start noticing those. I'm not talking about them just yet, but she's sitting in the atrium, right? You can see the background. She's sitting in the entrance hall. Caecilius est pater, one of your first sentences you saw in your textbook. Caecilius is my subject, est is my verb, and remember when we have that linking verb, we have a predicate nominative because we can flip the sentence. Caecilius is the father is Caecilius, means the same thing. All right, when you label, so labeling, remember so far we've just done this underlining thing. I actually want you to add another step in now. When you see a nominative case noun in a sentence, I want you to write the abbreviation nom above it. And then if it's singular, write singular. And if it's plural, write plural. And then underline it like we've been doing. So I would write above metella. I can't write very well with this little thing, so you'll have to give me a little leeway there. Nominative, SG for singular. right? And I do that above caecilius as well. I just don't feel like trying to write with my little dot on my screen right now. So let's talk accusative case. Accusative case is usually used for a direct object. It can also be used for a couple other things as well. We'll talk about them as we encounter them. You label it just like the nominative case by writing ACC and then singular or plural above it. And then if it's being the direct object, you double underline it. The one other use of the accusative we've seen so far is as the object of a preposition showing motion towards something. We saw it with the word in, right? In with the accusative case means into, so showing that motion towards, whereas in with the ablative just means in or on. So here's another example. We already have our subject, amicus. Now we have a direct object, metellum, salutat, and you can see from the direction, so the friend subject is doing the action greeting to metella, the direct object, which is in the accusative singular. A, C, C, S. This is really hard. G. Hope you all appreciate this. All right, so Latin noun endings. And Latin noun endings are what tells us the case, and they're what helps us determine what's happening in the sentence. So every Latin noun has what I call 4 properties. These are the 4 things you can tell about any noun simply by looking at its ending. You can tell its case. The case is going to tell you the function of a noun in the sentence. I have the suitcase, but also think about the suitcase as your business, right? It's the thing that carries the noun through the sentence. You can know its number, by which I mean if it's singular or plural. You can know its gender, if it's masculine, feminine, or neuter, keeping in mind that we're not talking like gender, but subgroupings of declensions. And you can tell its declension. Remember, declensions are groups of nouns with similar endings. I have a little guy declining here. So I'm going to use these visuals throughout our notes, so when we are talking about nouns and specific functions, I'll clue you in by that by using these different visuals here. So case, number, gender, declension. These are our properties of a Latin noun. And then declension, how you know which declension a noun belongs to, it's by its genitive case ending. That's why I have you memorize those genitive case endings as part of your vocabulary list. It's not because I'm mean and want to create more work, because these are actually going to help you know how to better use these nouns and recognize these nouns when you see them. All right, so what are our noun endings? Here we have them for first, second, and third declension. The nice thing is that each declension number sort of tells you how many genders exist. So first declension has 1 gender, feminine. Second declension has 2 genders, masculine and neuter. And then third declension has all 3 genders, masculine and feminine and neuter. So here we have our I, os. We're going to fill those out in our charts. Many of you guys charts in class to work with these. But if a noun ends in A, it's the nominative singular. If it ends in AM, it's the accusative singular. So puella, the girl sees. Puellam, the dog sees the girl. Direct object, puellam. Puellae, if there's more than one dog or girl. Puellae, the girls see the dog. The dog sees a group of girls. The dogs see the puellas, the group of girls. Hey, an S, just like we'd expect to see in plural in English. Isn't that nice? So here this chart you see has slashes on it. So, things on the left side of the slash are the masculine endings, and on the right side of the slash we have our neuter endings. Works the same way as above, though. The ending tells you the number, singular or plural, and the case. And then third declension's a little weird, because we have this lovely question mark right here. And this lovely question mark simply means that the third declension nominative singular can be pretty much anything it wants to be. You're going to have to memorize them. Sorry. Masculine and announcement. Let's pause. Okay, announcement's over. Number endings to the left of the stash this time are masculine and feminine endings. They have the same form. And then numbers to the right, letters to the right, I don't know why I'm saying numbers, are going to be your neuter forms. All right, one last thing. I know it's a lot. This is a fairly long lesson. We're going to practice this a lot in class. I'm going to make sure you guys are very, very comfortable because, like I said, this is a very foundational lesson. Adjectives, as you know, in English, they describe or modify a noun. In English, the adjective usually comes before the noun it modifies, the brown dog. In Latin, all adjectives have a form for all three genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter, and the nominative for all three of these is the dictionary form. So, for example, happy, laetus, laeta, laetum, has the masculine laetus, the feminine laeta, and the neuter laetum nominative form in it. Masculine, feminine, and neuter. And then adjectives usually come after the noun they modify. So in Latin, instead of saying the brown dog, you'd say the dog brown. And the reason they do that is they think it's probably more important to the meaning of the sentence that you know there's a dog than that you know what color the dog is. I actually tend to agree with this idea. One exception is adjectives that show quantity. So if you're saying there's 2 dogs, the number 2 will come before the noun for dogs. If there's one thing you need to remember about adjectives, it's this. Latin adjectives match the nouns they modify in case, number, and gender. They do not have to have the same declension. So they match the nouns they modify in case, number, gender. When we get to the DSK textbooks, they spell this out as gender, number, case, and call it genooking for some reason, but don't worry about that. When adjectives are with linking verbs, like in a predicate nominative, is going to match the subject in case, number, and gender. And you've actually already seen this. That's kind of the cool thing about this textbook. You've already seen all of this stuff happening. Now I'm just sort of explaining to you why it happens. So some examples. Remember, we're matching in case, number, and gender. Metella, if she's happy, she's going to be laeta. Case, number, and gender. Nominative, feminine, accusative. Caecilius, laetus, masculine, nominative, singular. Mercator. Mercator is a neutered noun. It's masculine, nominative, singular. Laetus can't change its declension. It has to use either first or second declension endings. So it's going to still end in us like it did for Caecilius, but it's still the same case, number, and gender. Same thing with mater, which is feminine, nominative, singular. So it's going to use that same nominative, feminine, singular ending, laeta. Same thing in the accusative case. When you have a first or second conjugation noun, metellon, laetam, caecilium, laetum, the endings are going to look exactly the same. When you have a third declension noun working with a first or second declension adjective, or 2-1-2 adjective as we call them, they're going to look different. Mercatorem, laetum, nominative, masculine, singular. Matrem, laetem, nominative, singular, masculine, right? And then with linking verbs, same thing. Metella est laeta, cocus est laetus, mercator est laetus, mater est laeta. So you can see it's the exact same order still. The same endings rather, right? You just stuck the word est in the middle of it. It's just another way to express the same idea. All right, a few more things on adjectives. You label an adjective with its case and number, just like you do with a noun. And then you underline, double underline, etc., so that it has the same function as the noun it's with. You can actually put them together. So metella est laeta, I will underline both of these. I'll write nominative singular above both of these. I'm not going to do it because the dot's annoying, but that's what I would do. Caecilius eratus, inculium intrat. I can actually underline these together if I wanted to and write nominative singular, or separate. It's totally up to you, your choice. I'll know what you mean. And then grumio cibum bonum, this time the adjective and noun pair are in the accusative case. All right, so metella is happy as an adjective with the linking verb est. Caecilius eratus inculium intrat. Angry Caecilius enters in the kitchen. Here it is again with the nominative case. Grumio tastes the good food. So example, right? We said food good. In Latin is what it says. In English, we'll translate it as good food. All right, so that's adjectives. Sorry, had a student come into my class. So that finishes our second video, and a very long video at that. I do apologize. Don't feel overwhelmed by this amount of information. I promise we're going to work through it in class. We'll do lots of practice. We'll go through it very, very slowly, and I'll make sure you guys really understand it and have a firm grasp of this very foundational lesson that we're going through today. All right, have a lovely rest of the day.